Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting, June 12, 2024. The time is 4 p.m. This meeting is called to order.
City Attorney Doctor.
Here.
City Manager Barton.
Here.
Commissioner Dean. Here. Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Reed. Here. Commissioner Shirtless.
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Here. Welcome and thank you for participating in the City of Helena City Commission Administrative Meeting. We are pleased to be able to provide this alternative meeting format in the city's effort to promote public participation. Please be patient as we may experience technical difficulties during the meeting. We welcome your public commentary. Please read the following tips and guidelines for your participation. Right. Commissioners, comments, questions? Recommendations from Helena Citizens Council, Representative Eden, you have to do it.
Thank you. We don't have any new recommendations, but we did want to thank you for your consideration of the HCC's budget recommendations. And to let you know that we're starting our neighborhood-specific public outreach here in the coming weeks. We've already started a few neighborhood meetings, and we're excited to be a part of the new land use planning opportunity that's coming up.
Comments or questions for Representative Eden? Thank you, sir. City Manager's report.
Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to invite Director Konopka to update the commission on our latest thinking of parking.
Yeah,
And knowing full well that at the commission meeting on Monday, we're going to consider creating the parking advisory board as well.
Thanks, Mayor and Commissioners. So we did some serious brainstorming on how to some of the comments made by the BID of the businesses and looking at some of our IT infrastructure and some of those things that are going to have to be upgraded. So we tried to think out of the box, and I think we got pretty far outside the box. Don't be scared. But kind of fell in our laps of a new concept moving forward for parking, and what that would be would help parking and help everyone else. So we would treat the parking garages like surface lots, multiple level surface lots. But instead of the parking arms being there, we would have kiosks at the exits. So you would just pay for your parking on the parking garage. That serves two. One is it would be consistent. Every place that you're paying for parking would be a kiosk. It'd be the same on the street, on the parking lots, and in the garages. With that, we would eliminate all the zones that are in parking. So downtown would become one zone, one rate, one zone. So if you started off at a business, I'm just going to use Fire Tower Coffee. They stop there and plug the meter for the kiosk for 4 hours. You could get up, move your car, and go into the parking garage and still have those parking rights. That would, expand and allow some people some flexibility. And then for reverse of that, if you parked in the garage and you made your way down the Last Chance Gulch and you noticed that you needed to up your parking, if you didn't use the app, you could stop at any kiosk, put your plate number in, and you would have parking rights. So a little bit more, some flexibility there, and then not losing some of that time that we plug the meter with. You could move down the line. So along with that, that would go to all our garages. So 6th and Getchell, Jackson. There's such a backlog on permit parking. We're proposing to change that to permit only, so that garage would be paid through permits, and that would be it. So Getchell and 6th would fall under these new kiosk parameters, and so you could go from Getchell to all the way down the gulch. So with that, a lot of the IT infrastructure that we found to be needing upgraded in our after we've gone through it, that eliminates that. So that eliminates some cost, parking, and helps save the budget there. And then with Getchell and Sixth, we've proposed to remove the first hour free parking that's currently there, leaving them in the lots. And so if the new parking board gets created on Monday night, it was discussed with the BID and parking that some of those more detailed issues, like where's the first hour free parking, where's potential for discounted employee parking, what are the sideboards for that program, a lot of these other kind of deeper dives into the parking policy itself would be left to, if that board was created, left to that board to work out with the city staff and the BID and business owners. So I know that was kind of a lot. Be happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions from the commission? Please.
Mr. Mayor, I think this could be pretty solution to maybe implement, and maybe anxious to hear some of the public feedback too. One question I have on the scheduled garage piece. I work over there, and I know there are a bazillion conferences that happen in the hotel. A lot of people. Especially when the carousel lot is filled, which is almost every day. Especially when the hotels are full. So does that, I mean, where do we think those people go?
So the parking would pretty much operate as it is now. Some of the, we would, since we have permits sold in each garage, we would designate permit parking so that people that had current permits wouldn't get pushed out by people just coming in and parking. The second step to that would be that the fine structure would be, because most people flock to the garages, the fine for parking in a garage with no parking rights would be higher than it would be in the service lot, which would be higher than the on-street parking. So, I think any idea that we have moving forward, we're going to have to, watch, reevaluate, adjust. And as we, if we see something that's not working for, like, we'll just say permit holders, then we'll adjust that. But as far as conferences and trainings and all that stuff, we, the message that we want to get out to the businesses and everybody else is contact us ahead of time, because we can make arrangements to find parking or reserve parking for those events so that it's not a chaotic where do I park thing. It's already designated. It can go out as the literature for the conference or the training or whatever and say you have free parking here, or you take your parking pass. You can issue temporary permits. So if we can get that message out and work with those, I think we'll be.
And I guess my one other question is with movie theater.
Movie theater, again, we would just have a certain amount of paid permit parking, and then there would be so much reserved down there as just open spaces, and we would just listen to see if we're having issues, and then we would adjust moving forward. We're not thinking that this is going to be the perfect fix, but we think it's a good first step. We just continue to evaluate and adjust as we.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shirtley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I was on mute there for a moment. The question's for Director Kanapi. With the kiosk, I think it's great. It's a good, innovative idea, like you guys said, out of the box. But do you anticipate any issues with the drivers having to get out and look at their license plates to be able to enter that in? Or do they grab their ticket, pull into their spot? How does this process seem to work? Can you describe that for us, Director?
Sure. Mayor, Commissioners, we don't have all the details worked out right now, but what would happen with the gate arms would go away. So you want the ticket. The kiosk would be located on the pedestrian exits of the garage with signs up, don't forget to pay for your parking. And then, because
the meters run. Yeah.
People would just have to take a picture of their license plate, keep it on their phone. You know, when we first rolled this out, we had keychains that you could write your license plate down on. So there's some of that public interaction that we can do, but you wouldn't have to get out of your car until after you parked, and then you pay on your way out of the garage.
Follow-up comment, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward to Monday night. I think the conversation between downtown businesses and the residents and workers in the ideas that are going to come from the parking commission, I think are going to be great. So thank you very much, Director Konopke, for working with them.
It might be worth reaching out to them. This is the way MSU's parking garage works, and every time I'm there, I never seem to have any issues, but it might be worth just reaching out and finding out if they have any lessons on terms of the education. Because all sorts of people from all over that come and use that.
So Mayor, really quick, if I would, we've already talked to the BID, and the chamber is already planning on doing some educational pieces. So we'll definitely reach out to them to see about lessons learned. But I think with the cooperation between the BID, the chamber, and the city, I think we can get this up and running. And then, like I said, we can adjust as we move forward.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Director Knopke. I think this was certainly an interesting idea. I'm looking forward to hearing how it goes. I would just ask that maybe once we implement it, we remember to put it on an agenda after maybe 6 months to check in, so that we have an opportunity to hear from the public and everybody else about how it's going. But I really do appreciate the efforts to find solutions. Thank you for that.
Mayor, the BID and chamber are here. If they have comments.
Yeah, I was just
Okay.
about to do that.
Sorry.
Okay, do we have any public comments on this topic? Yes, please.
Mayor, Commissioners, Megan Halston with the BID. I just wanted to say that we like this idea, and I think it's a great step towards solutions around parking, and really appreciate transportation reached out to include us in this conversation and brainstorming ideas on some of the parking issues. Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioners, Kelly Ashton with the Helena Area Chamber of Commerce, and we echo Megan's sentiment. I think that working out of the box in this particular instance really benefited everyone, and we just appreciate all of the collaboration that has happened in the past couple weeks. And yeah, we will add knowing your license plate to our list of educational videos.
Do we have any others?
That concludes the report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any city attorney, do you have anything?
Mayor, Commissioners, I do not. Thank you.
Presentation, Stewart Homes, Section 18, disposition application, environmental certifying official designation draft resolution. Man, this is a mouthful. Director Brink, you have the floor.
Mayor, if you'll allow me, I would like to give my time to Mr. O'Neill from the Housing Authority.
Mr. O'Neill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, as a city manager. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and really appreciate the assistance of city staff in meeting some key deadlines this month. As we've been discussing off and on for a couple of years, that the Housing Authority is moving forward on what's called public housing repositioning, and that means our public housing program, which is considered Section 9 of the housing law, will be moved to what's called Section 8 of public housing. So Section 8, people are familiar with as the Housing Choice Voucher Program. And so it moves it to a different type of rental assistance, but we are not proposing any loss of rent assisted housing in Helena. Our goal is to create additional housing. And so in that process, it's a convoluted, somewhat irrational process that we have to work through with HUD. And the first thing that we're moving on is on Stewart Homes what's called a Section 18 disposition application. And so, and we're doing it under what's called physical obsolescence. And we have to meet a certain criteria, little 57% of the costs of renovations being the total development costs. We think we're around 63, 64%. We've had outside firms doing detailed physical needs assessments. We've been developing an environmental review record, and we'll proceed on this application. We're always shooting for around July 1st, July 15th. And then about 3 weeks ago, we had released a notice, one of the classic 60-page notices, and buried in there was this, it was primarily about a change and they've been working on. The primary data system in public and Indian housing is this data system called PIC, and that's going to be shut down sometime later this summer, and it's going to be replaced by what's called HIP, Housing Information Portal. They don't really have, they're not really solid on these, when it's going to happen, when it's going to be done, but they did announce they're going to stop taking repositioning applications for a period as of July 1st. So we began really scrambling, and that's why we're really pushing hard with city staff. We really appreciate their support. So why it's important, the Stewart Homes Section 18 application is really the linchpin to our repositioning. So we have 366 public housing units, and our goal in our repositioning is to try to maximize the long-term subsidy that we'll be bringing into Helena to forever and ever support those units. And so currently our public housing subsidy, if calculated in relation to what's currently called the fair market rent, would be about 80%. And under repositioning, if we're able to get through the Section 18 through for Helena, we'd be able to get about 100% of our units, 110% of fair market rent. As you know, the City Commission is working with us on a fair market rent reevaluation, which is proceeding. We expect to be able to have the fair market rents to be increased, which will also bring in additional funds. Is it just to get higher subsidy from the federal government? No, it's to pay and finance all the improvements that need to be done on all of our properties. So Stewart Homes, first under construction 1940, phase 1, 72 units. We have 60 units built in 1952, among the oldest public housing in the country. And old doesn't count. They still have to meet all these obsolescence things. So we're going, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get ready for this, and we're ready to go. And so we'll be submitting this application. And two things we're here today to talk about. One, we'll need an environmental review done. We've prepared the environmental review record with our national vendor who has prepared that record. And in your packet tonight is just a resolution that you'll be acting on Monday regarding selecting Community Development Director Brink as the certifying officer as required to do that work. Second, the other requirement of the application is that we have a letter of support and consultation that's also in your packet from Mayor Collins. And so we appreciate your review of that. And it doesn't necessarily require action, but it's in your packet for review and for questions. But our goal is to submit no later than June 28th with this application. We would expect to hear back on that linchpin application by this fall, hopefully sooner, early September, and then we'll be able to proceed on the rest of our strategy. So if we don't receive Section 18 approval, it would mean about roughly 79 of our 366 units would have a much lower 80% of fair market rent subsidy going forward. So it's really critical that we get this done. It's kind of silly that we have to pursue this. It's like it's over 80-year-old housing, but this is the way it works. Certain things don't even count in the process. Like the fact that we do water and sewer and sanitation and all those kinds of things. We have to carry that alone. One thing that's important to note, we don't get any additional funding or any special funding to do the redevelopment work that's required. And so that's why it's important to get those higher rental subsidies going forward, because but then we'll have to compete for low-income housing tax credits and other housing funding. But one thing we do get is that we'll get control and ownership of the property. We kind of passed on to one of our subsidiary nonprofits for the purpose of redevelopment. And so I think I've said this here before, but a lot of folks aren't aware that public housing, nowhere in the country since 1986 are you allowed to add a single public housing unit in the country. So all of our property here in the city of Helena, where we have some excess land, we can't build on it because it's public housing. Through this process, we'll be able to get control of that land, and that's really a primary benefit that we will receive some higher rent subsidies to help capitalize the improvements. We will have control of the properties and both the land and the units going forward. So thank you for your time today. I'm for questions. This you'll be tired of seeing me by the time we're through this process. Because why are we doing this? This seems silly again. Yes, but this is what we have to do. You'd expect to be able to have a very streamlined rest of the process if we get the Stewart homes approved.
Thank you. Comments from the commission? Do you have any public comments on this topic? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Thank you, Director O'Neill. Thank you. Okay, tax increment finance board discussion. Planner Ray, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. So we are presenting some changes to TIP advisory board resolutions to you today. I'm hoping to get your input on how you'd like us to proceed. So by way of history, for those that are not as versed in these advisory boards, we first established a railroad urban renewal districts with TIP provision in 2015, and within 2 years of that, we established a board for that. Following that, we created the downtown urban renewal district as sort of like an offshoot of the neighborhood plan that was adopted for the area, and then established a board for that in early 2020. Commissioner Shirtliff actually served as chair on that before he became a commissioner, so he's definitely versed in this. These boards were created with slightly odd numbers and of seated members and very specific constituencies that each has to represent. This is made actually filling the positions, particularly for the downtown district, which has 14 members. 4 of the seats are vacant right now, very hard to recruit for. Both boards have even numbers, which also makes it difficult for a quorum. So the railroad district has 8. Again, the downtown has 14. These are established in resolutions. Neither of the resolutions for the boards actually reflect what was adopted by the commission last year for resolution 2856, the commission boards and committees policies. So we'd like to bring these boards into alignment with that, number one. Number two, we would like to reconstitute the membership of the boards so that there are 7 members per board instead of 8 and 14 respectively, and make it a little more open so it's easier to hopefully recruit for those positions. One wrinkle is that, as you know, we also have a Capitol Hill urban renewal district with a TIP provision. We have not established an advisory board. Part of that was, I think, by design with a previous city manager, because we had been courting the idea of possibly creating a revitalization redevelopment agency to administer these districts. And we have not gone that route. State statute doesn't require that we create an advisory board. It can just be a staff recommendation, as we do with other things, presented to you as the final arbiters about whether we grant TIP funds to an applicant. The planning division, which has 6 FTEs and then an admin assistant on top of that, we currently manage 8 boards as it is. Creating a Capitol Hill TIF district would add the 9th. We also may, at some point, start staffing a housing task force meeting again. And then we also liaise with you. So it's a lot for our division to bear. We'd rather not have another urban renewal district tax increment financing advisory board added into the mix. So at the very least, we're hoping to start out by changing the resolution for the TIF advisory board for the downtown district, and then follow that up with the railroad district. Another option for you is to consider consolidating the 3 urban renewal district tax increment financing advisory boards into one. with representation from each district. So this would be done obviously in the understanding that the TIF funds accrued in each district have to be spent within the confines of that district. It's just you'll have more of a city perspective, citywide perspective, I guess you could say, on the use of those funds. So I don't know if I'm missing anything else. I'll certainly let Chris or even Danae jump in if there is anything else to mention about this, but we would love to know from you all which direction you would like to move forward.
Thank you, Planner Ray. Comments from the commission. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Planner Ray, are there any recommendations or comments from the existing two TIF boards about their views on the matter?
Not presently. I think that it's been discussed in the past and not undeservedly. I think that they all have a vested interest in their own district and want to be the arbiters of decision making on that and their recommendations to you guys. I understand that. I appreciate that. But from a administrative staffing standpoint, it's just been more difficult for us in some instances. And establishing the quorum has been very difficult. Another thing that we'd be doing with these changes to resolutions, no matter which way you elect to move forward, is we would have ex officio members serving in advisory capacity. This is really helpful for us. Right now, we have the school district and MBAC each having designated seats on our two established advisory boards. For MBAC in particular, that's a little tricky because one, we struggle to get a quorum as it is, but two, they often will refer applicants to us and then find themselves in a position where they might have to recuse themselves from voting. So creating these advisory seats would be extremely helpful, the ex officio seats.
Yeah, comments. Go ahead.
I guess I'd be comfortable with the idea of consolidation. So I think if to get a really better sense that those existing TIF board members had sort of comfort level with it as well. Consolidation seems to make sense to me.
So I'll also agree with that. But let's discuss that with the existing members. But I will agree with consolidation. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to agree with my fellow commissioners. I think, and you, Mr. Mayor, talking with our existing TIF board members in the railroad and downtown to gauge their interest and receive their feedback. But I'll reserve my feelings on it. But I appreciate the community development department working on this for us.
So, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So, Planner Ray or Director Brink, what was your vision, or when were you hoping to sort of have some resolution on this?
Mayor, Commissioner Logan, we have no set window to make this happen. We want to first gauge your appetite before we move forward. Our preferred alternative is to consolidate. But we have not collaborated with the two other boards yet. We just wanted to gauge what your appetite was for that. One of the benefits of a consolidated board is we would be more comfortable now wrapping in and providing some representation for the Capitol Hill area as well. So that it brings them into the fold, easier for us to manage.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one more question. For Director Brink, if we were to consolidate these two boards, I understand Planner Ray had mentioned 7 members. So would the railroad get 4 and downtown get 3 members? Or how do you envision the numbers to break down for the district, for the new consolidated board?
Mayor, Commissioner Shartliff, thank you. So we have a draft consolidated TIF board resolution. We didn't include it in the packet, but currently in draft form, that will be 9 members, 3 from each And then, of course, the ex officio or advisory members of that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Just really briefly, I think one of the things that I want to be conscious of when we're making this is that I think that there's probably opportunity for our staff to be able to give more attention and like quality attention to a consolidated board because given the constraints of our budget, we just don't necessarily have the capacity to expand this to additional positions, and I think give it the attention it really needs. The other thing that I think might be a benefit if we do consolidate is that there could be a greater diversity of ideas of projects that could come to this board because I think I mean, sometimes we see similar projects in all of the areas, but every once in a while there's something really unique in a particular district that I don't know if maybe another area, because they're so siloed right now, would have any idea that's even occurring. And so I think there's probably going to be more potential to be more innovative with these dollars around the community. I also don't want any area of the district to feel like they're losing a voice, but I mean, the fact that we are having trouble, I mean, 14 members is a lot on one. That's how specific some of those roles. And I would really like to see us get something up and moving for the Capitol Hill Mall area, especially given the presentation that Michael just gave. I mean, we are timed very perfectly with Helena Housing Authority's repositioning, that being in that URD. I mean, I'd love for us to be able to hit the ground running and have a perspective at the table that doesn't exist.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sort of in line with Commissioner Sherlock, I'd like to hear specifically from the TIF boards about their views. But the one concern I have just procedurally, which I'm sure we can find a solution to if we move towards consolidation, is if it's 3, 3, and 3, theoretically the railroad TIF board could be outvoted on a project in their TIF. And I would just like to make sure we've sort of envisioned some of the scenarios that could arise from consolidation and prioritization from local projects. I suspect answers can be found, but I want to make sure if we consolidate that we really give people the opportunity to have the voice that they had when it was their own board. So I'd welcome feedback from the existing boards. I'd welcome some thoughts on how it could work procedurally, but I'm not vehemently opposed to consolidation if we can find a happy medium.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments on this topic? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Then Maria, you got your marching orders, so to speak, or you
I believe-
you for it, huh?
Absolutely.
She said she didn't have it.
Mayor, Commissioner.
For the commission?
Yes, I believe so. And we actually do have a meeting that will be scheduled for the Downtown Taxi Group Financing Advisory Board for July. And we can also make sure that we hold one for the Railroad District next month as well to pitch this to them, engage how they feel about it, and present that back to you at an admin meeting or whenever else works.
Thank you. Transportation. Lieutenant pedestrian crossing at Bozeman.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm going to turn this over to our consultant, Scott Randall from Robert Petch and Associates. He's going to go over that crossing and alternatives that we've offered.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me here this afternoon. As David said, I want to talk through actually 2 different crossings that we've been looking at for pedestrian improvements, kind of give a status update where those are at. We've been looking at some options for each location, wanted to get some feedback on thoughts on those options and kind of how best to move forward before we get into kind of full design and implementation to get these things on the ground. So with that, let's see if I can get this going. So a little bit of background. So these crossing locations were originally identified in the 2021 multimodal traffic study that looked at the 5-point intersections and connecting corridors. So within that traffic study that was completed, Lindale Avenue is one of the focus corridors. There's pretty poor connectivity for pedestrians across that road. We know it's a high volume facility, 4 lanes, pretty difficult to cross. There's an existing crossing there that's pretty under signs and undermarked and provides pretty poor protection for pedestrians. And so looking at improvements to either that or a different location, which I'll get into here in a minute. The other location was regarding crossing North Montana Avenue and thinking about future connectivity of the Centennial Trail to cross that barrier. Right now, as you know, Centennial Trail stops at, I believe it's National, where it ends. And in order to get across Montana, you got to go up and use the 5-point intersection. Does not make a great connection. And, you know, we've heard a lot about from pedestrians about improved connection for them. So those are the 2 locations I want to talk about a little bit more. So this map just, again, kind of shows those areas. On Lindale, there's that existing crossing that I mentioned. Here at Warren Street, it is just straight signed right now. It's pretty hard to see. We have very low compliance for vehicles stopping for pedestrians there. So looking at ways to improve that. With that 2021 study, the recommendation was actually made to move that crossing a block to the east, to the Rodney Ewing Street location. The recommendation for that was that it provides better connectivity to Centennial Trail for future connection and provides a good connection down Rodney Street to HMS as well. So we felt if there's going to be investment made at a crossing, that would be a better location than improving the existing one that is there today. And then I mentioned Montana Avenue. So again, as we think about Centennial Trail and making improvements and kind of finishing that trail to the east, we looked at different routing options, and it was determined that the best option was to go and use Argyle Streets and eventually make the crossing on Montana Avenue along Bozeman Streets as the preferred location there, versus routing down along Lindale Avenue using the signal at the 5-point intersection, which is pretty difficult to navigate as a pedestrian. So I'm going to talk through both these locations and our options here briefly. Lindale Avenue, like I said, the existing crossing, kind of see here in the picture, but basically there's a couple signs there. Really low compliance. Heard from a lot of pedestrians, experienced it myself. You can be standing there waiting and vehicles pretty rarely stop for you. So the recommendation again was to move that crossing a block to the east and provide a more enhanced crossing opportunity there. And I'll talk about what that means here in a minute. I talked about that better connectivity to HMS, Memorial Park, and Legion Field with those improvements as well. So option number 1 would be to basically work within the existing roadway as it is today. The curbs were recently rebuilt by Department of Transportation. There's new ADA upgrades up along this down this corridor. Those are brand new as of I think 2 years ago. So one of the options would be to just work within those confines, put in new ADA ramps for the crossings, put in a better treatments. I'll talk about a couple different treatment options. There's basically either treatment option we'd look at would be an overhead treatment. So instead of just a sign on the side of the road, we'd be looking at an overhead, either an RFB, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which we have a few of those around town, on Benton Avenue, a couple other locations as well, or a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which I'll show you here in a minute, a little bit different treatment. So either way, we'd be looking at a more visible treatment that would result in better driver compliance. So this option would be the least impactful. We'd maintain that existing roadway footprint. It'd be about a 60-foot crossing distance, so pedestrians would cross 60 feet to get to curb. And again, we would use overhead enhanced signing versus just pedestals on the side. Option 2 would be kind of building off of that, where we would redo the curbs at the intersection there and do bulb outs. So we have a lot of bulb outs downtown. They're great for pedestrians. They shorten our crossing distances. This would cut off about 8 feet of that crossing distance in total. So going from about 60 feet of crossing to 52 feet of crossing by doing those bulb outs. So there's a net positive there. Some of the negatives to that is we'd be rebuilding the intersection a bit more than the other option, having to redo some curb lines. We have some drainage challenges here too, so that would have to be figured out. It's very flat through here, and we have some puddling that already occurs. So trying to figure out the drainage, also some maintenance challenges with snowplows, keeping them clear, that sort of thing. This option would also include overhead signage as well, and that advanced treatment. Option 3 was kind of the next level of control that we looked at, where we put in a center median refuge island. I don't know if you can see it from back there, but basically it'd be a center island where you could then cross in 2 stages. So you cross one direction of travel, have a refuge, and cross another direction of travel. A little more protection for the pedestrians that cross, shorter crossing distances, but additional costs, additional construction, and additional concerns from a maintenance standpoint, especially for snow removal, having to keep that clear and maintained through the winter. Montana Avenue, same type of thing here. So I mentioned looking at the crossing on the south side of Bozeman Street, thinking about a future connection of Centennial Trail going down Argyle Street, connecting across Bozeman and continuing to the east. Mentioned right now, the only protection you have is at the 5-point intersection, so looking at a better location there. Improved routing for Centennial Trail, and then improving that connectivity to the 6th Ward area. Right now, it's wide open there. There's no protection or crossing there at all. We do not have existing curb and gutter, minus a couple of these intersection corridors that have either some pin down curb or some old curb that's there. But overall, we do not have curb and gutter out there, or sidewalks even. So looking at a couple different options here. Option 1 would be, again, starting least impactful. So this would be fitting within kind of the existing constraints, building some additional sidewalk on the west side of Montana, and making a connection that goes a little bit in a slight skew to connect with Bozeman Street. The reason for that is there's an entrance into the business here. So it'd basically be maintaining that existing entrance as it is, and building that crossing it at a slight skew. We would put in new curb and gutter around to better define that. And again, with that new sidewalk, this option, like the other ones on Lindale, would have overhead signage, overhead treatments to help, with the vehicle control there. On the east side, this would include curb as well, because again, there's no curb there, so we could do a bulb out treatment with that as well. So it'd be about a 60-foot crossing distance, similar to the other one, again, with a little bit of a slight skew there. This would have no major impacts to the business access that's there, and again, would be the least impactful option. Option 2 would be taking it just a little step further, so getting rid of that slight skew that we have, making it perpendicular. But with that, we would have to relocate and redesign that business approach there, shifting it a little bit to the south to get it away from that crossing. So a little bit of different treatments. It does, again, similar to Lindale, reduce that crossing distance a little bit by making it perpendicular and allowing us to build that curb line out a little bit more, reduces that by about 8 feet, so about 52-foot crossing there. More cost, more impacts associated with it because of that relocated approach and some additional impacts there. And then option 3, again, similar to the other one, where we would look at a refuge island in the middle. So same type of impacts where we'd have to relocate that approach, but we would put a center refuge island in the middle, do a potential 2-stage crossing where, again, you cross one direction at a time. But again, concerns with snow removal and maintenance, keeping that clear, and some additional costs with that as well. So kind of with each of these, we're looking at, low, medium, high as far as cost impacts go, and some trade-offs for visibility and protection for pedestrians. The other thing I wanted to mention, so the different crossing treatment types that we have. So the RFB, again, you guys are probably familiar with this. We have a lot of these in town. You can do those overhead as well. So when you push the button on the side, you can have an overhead flasher as well that provides better visibility. So especially on a 4-lane road, which both of these are, we would highly recommend doing an overhead one there as well, so that you don't have it just on the side and then it gets obscured by a vehicle. So highly recommend including an overhead structure and a flasher on that as well. So the RFBs, they're LEDs. We can typically power them with solar, which reduce some of our costs. They do have good visibility and compliance when coupled with the overhead structure. I have a note here that they have highly variable driver compliance rates, some very low and some extremely high. But when coupled with that overhead treatment, that compliance for drivers to stop for pedestrians is on the higher end, much higher end. So another thing here that I'll note before I get to the next one is that there is no traffic requirements or pedestrian requirement to put this in as far as meeting a minimum threshold, such as pedestrian warrants or signal warrants, which is not the case for pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is kind of our next tier. This is short of a full traffic signal, but it's fairly close. Basically, you push a button and it has a series of flashing lights that alerts drivers that they need to stop. It's a little bit different condition than the RFB, where it's a yield condition for pedestrians. This requires vehicles to stop by law, so it's like a red light. So we do have a little bit higher compliance rates, but there's additional costs that come with that. And then there are some requirements for having minimum number of pedestrians that use that crossing in a given hour to be able to put this in. So two different crossing treatments we're looking at right now. Both kind of have their pros and cons. I would say from a familiarity standpoint, most people, especially in the Helena area, are very familiar with RFBs. See the flashing light, they generally know what that means. We do not have any of these hybrid beacons in town. There's, I believe, one in Bozeman that's active near campus, and there's a couple of others around the state, but they are a lot less common throughout the state. And they do have a bit of a learning curve with what the flashing lights mean and everything, since it's a bit new. So just real quick before I open it up for questions or comments here, we have done some public outreach. We've had some initial meetings with the Department of Transportation. Of course, both of these roadways are on the highway system. So anything that we do, we got to get their approval and make sure that we're meeting their standards and everything. So we developed an options memo where we looked at each of these three options, kind of presented some pros and cons, got some feedback from them. Overall, I would say they were less in favor of the Center Island options because of the maintenance concerns and some issues with that. Some challenges there. I wouldn't say we were told absolutely not, but more just that they were less in favor of that as an option. They did note, as I said, with the hybrid beacon option, that it does require warrants for a number of pedestrians. Right now, we don't meet those warrants because we don't have pedestrians using these crossings because they don't exist. So in order to put that in, we would have to justify that we're going to meet those warrants, which is, it's kind of a tough thing to do right now based on unknowns. There was a comment that the skewed crossing at Montana was a little bit less desirable for somebody that's vision impaired because of the angle. But again, it wasn't noted that that was a complete no-go, just that it was kind of the negative of that option. And then just noting to coordinate with the ongoing Railroad District Neighborhood Plan. I think that's in the works right now, and making sure that these are talking to each other. We don't want documents that are not saying the same thing. So we did hold a public meeting about 2 months ago. Only had about 11 attendees, but had good comments and participation from those that did attend. Overall, both with that public meeting and the outreach that we did for the 2021 traffic study, we had a lot of support for these improvements. I think everybody recognizes these improvements are very much needed. So really had no negative feedback as far as making improvements. The only maybe kind of, difference of opinion was about relocating that crossing on Lindale. There were some people who preferred the location where it's at today versus moving it a block to the east, just because of their preferred routes or their thoughts on connectivity. So there were a few comments that suggested we leave it in place and upgrade that existing one versus moving it. So I think that's it. I guess, right now, what we're trying to do is identify the preferred alternative. None of the three options at either location, I would say, have a fatal flaw. So we're really looking for kind of feedback and some direction or some support or one way or the other on these to help us move forward into design. Each of them, again, has pros and cons. So we're just trying to have some more discussion and figure out where that takes us. So, I guess on that, and I don't know, David, if you want to talk on time frame on implementation or anything next.
Just some background is we applied for the Lindale one, the crossing, because the round before that, we got told that was the preferred crossing by MDT and that it scored really well. There was just some things that we had to tweak. So going into that, we felt pretty confident about getting funded through the TA program for that one. Unfortunately, we did get funded for that. But when we budgeted for these, we budgeted for the match for the Lindale crossing, but we also budgeted money for the construction of Bozeman crossing because we felt both of these crossings were really important for the area. So right now we only have budget for the Bozeman crossing. The second one I wanted to bring up is our RRP compliance is fairly high. We went when we switched that one out to Country Club, where we were getting constant complaints that the drivers weren't stopping. We put out some collection data and they weren't even, coming close to obeying the speed limit. But since then, since we have that, we haven't got any complaints that drivers aren't stopping because you've heard me say this before, the flashing yellow lights that flash all the time are annoying to me because they are just background and white noise to people. People just see them, but these are pedestrian actuated. So when somebody needs to cross, they push it and then all of a sudden these flashy lights come up and it really brings the attention to the crossing. So I think the compliance level of the RFPs are pretty high for us. The other one on the skewed comment, it just be happenstance. I had a webinar the other day about innovations and accessibility, and one of the things they're doing that they're piloting in some areas is because we have skewed situations, or we have those what we call blended transitions that are just rounded and then have the tactile warning panels going around the curve. They don't provide that direction for low vision folks. So what they're doing is adding an additional panel behind that tactile warning that orients them to the crossing angle. So they can stand on that, orient themselves to how they cross, and then they can walk forward. So if we have to do the skewed version, even though that it's not a preferred one, I think that we can design some of these alternatives in there and use them as a pilot project to see how well they work, and then if they work well, start incorporating them in other parts of the city. Time frame, as Scott mentioned, looking for a preferred alternative so that we can submit and start moving forward with design and get to MDT. We're not obviously going to make this summer, so construction would be likely next summer is what we'd be shooting for. But again, we have to move through MDT's approval process and comment period. So we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Director Kanafi. I appreciate the piece about the orientation panel. I recall we had a gentleman come to one of our meetings who said that in the winter time, because of snow banks, he couldn't find the curve and his dog couldn't. He didn't know where the curve started or ended and how to find it. So I think if we move forward with any of these pedestrian crossings, I would just ask that we're mindful about snow removal around places we are funneling pedestrians, because the panels are all great as long as they're accessible and not buried in snow. But I appreciate your attention to that.
So one of the things that we are doing differently that is found in ProAg is where we have boulevard instead of those wings or flares on the side. We're going to the pedestrian curve, so that's a vertical face, so that it channelizes that crossing much more than just having those flares. So
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions, I guess. Do we have to get rid of the existing, like if we did the Lindale crossing, can we also keep the old crossing? Or do we have to give it up?
Mayor and Commissioners, I would say that MDT would say it's one or the other because it's so close. They don't want that.
It's too bad. There's a lot more crossings for pedestrians.
I think that'd be when we talked to them initially, that crossing was kind of on their radar for safety improvements. And so I think they'd like to see a safe crossing. I think the problem is if we're keeping one in that we know is unsafe and has issues already, that compliance is pretty poor, that, we're perpetuating an issue.
I guess my second question is, do we know if MDT has any plans to install curb and gutter and sidewalks on Montana? Because that is one area that I mean, it is like terrifying seeing people walking on Montana with no sidewalks and has continued not to do anything about it.
Mayor and commissioners, there's no plans at this time, but we have suggested in the past that Montana corridor from the 5 Point all the way out to basically the city limits would be a great, what are they nowadays, grants?
Poison.
Yeah, corridor improvement where we could address drainage, pedestrians, curb and gutter, all that to really improve that corridor and make it an attractive corridor to walk or to drive.
So I really hope they will consider something like that because it is, I mean, especially where I've said David like, I know he's not answering it, but I mean, it is so difficult for people to walk to and from. I mean, there's people who go to work, going to lunch, walk to the gas station, and I mean, it is people going 45 miles an hour next home with ice and snow and rest. So in terms of Glendale, I think I would really like to see the rapid flashing beacon, but I think having the bulb outs would be really helpful. From all the places that we've seen them installed around town, they always seem to make a big difference. I know, look right by Carol and the bulb outs next to Carol. I mean, everyone always stops when someone is at the bulb out, and you can see them. And so I think that it also might give us an opportunity for potential vegetation to improve so much of anything in the area in terms of vegetation. And on Montana, I guess do we have the budget to address the realignment that would be required if we had it wasn't a diagonal crossing but just straight?
Mayor and commissioners, that would be fleshed out through the design process, and then as we look at bid tab history to see, if we had the budget. But I think we're in the ballpark. It would just be a matter of getting in farther into design. That's our preference, to have those perpendicular crossings instead of skew. But again, if the skew crossing is what we can get, we can try some of those other innovations to ensure that it's as safe as possible.
And I guess that's my final comments from me. I'd prefer for it to be that perpendicular, because I think that probably makes the most sense. But if it means it's cost prohibitive, I'd rather have a safe crossing than none.
Sure, thank you. So, Director Kanaki, are you wanting specific direction from us today?
Mayor and commissioners, yeah. So we can kind of go down one road or the other. The crossing is the crossing. I think RFPs, it's kind of the chicken and the egg thing with the hybrid beacons. You have to have the crossings to allow it to be installed, but if you don't have a crossing, obviously you're not going to have the numbers. So the RFPs are most likely. So that's kind of a given. It's more of do you want the refuge islands? Do you want the bulb outs that direction, so that we can take those next steps inside.
So I guess to that end, I'd say I'm perfectly fine with the perpendicular crossings without bulb outs. Both of those locations. I'm assuming no bike lanes in these areas.
I thought I saw. Yeah.
Not on either of the main facilities. The one I mentioned, I guess I just mentioned connectivity down Rodney Street, which hits Helena Avenue, which has bike lanes, but no bike lanes on the highway facilities. You're correct. Yep.
Commissioner Shirley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Randall, for putting this together for us. I've been a part of conversations with regards to Montana Avenue and Lindale prior to becoming city commissioner. And I agree with Commissioner Dean. It's terrifying to watch people try and cross either of those streets, especially with the Centennial Trail, the baseball field, the people that live and go to school off of Rodney. I like the idea of bulb outs, I think, for beautification and for safety reasons. I like the perpendicular crossing on Montana. I was on a map here just a moment ago looking at how we could utilize, instead of going so far down or so far south on Montana, that would be on the other side. But I think part of the issue is, of course, you have a sign and there's no sidewalk on the other side of the street there. I do have a concern, and I don't know if it's where the idea of, and this could be either directed at the Director Konopke or Mr. Randall, if vehicles back up coming from the north, we're just a block shy of the railroad track. If the beacons go off and the railroad goes by, is there a contingency plan, or is there a release valve there on, is that Argyle, or what street is that there? I'm just concerned about the railroad crossing, but also too, I'd like to see a price tag for these options as well.
Mayor and Commissioners, what's the mitigation tools that we could use for the crossing? Because that came up with the comments from MDT is similar to what we have at the Benton crossing, where we have an advance warning sign on the north side of the track. So as soon as those are pushed, the lights would go off at both locations and that would signal the drivers to stop. So that has worked very well at Benton. I don't think we've had any issues with people getting stuck on the tracks or back up. So that would similar to what we would probably employ for the Montana.
It's do some traffic modeling for this too, to look at that exact situation. And we were very short of the railroad crossing, so that was definitely a concern. With the RRFB as an option, I mentioned that's a yield condition. So when there's a pedestrian that's crossing, once they, pass in front of you, you're allowed to go. You don't have to wait for them to cross the entire street.
Sure.
So the actual time spent stopped to have that queue building up is actually very minimal. And so we looked at some pretty aggressive growth scenarios just to say, what if we had a big flood of traffic? Because that is a pretty critical situation, right? And we are very comfortable that that situation is very unlikely to happen. So,
and just one follow up too: is there a opportunity, since it is, actually I should ask really quick, Mr. Director Konopke, Montana is a state-owned road, is that correct?
Yeah, Mayor and Commissioners, yes, that's correct.
Is there an opportunity to cost share with them, with the state of Montana on this, or are we on our own?
Mayor and Commissioners, we can always ask, but if they, in past practice, if they don't have an identified safety issue, then no.
All right, cool. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Director Konopke. I would say all of us also on the window one, particularly given the school trail, baseball fields, et cetera, and perpendicular on to with these good reference.
Got it. Mayor and Commissioners, so I think what we'll start with is, because we've heard bulb outs, so we'll just look at bulb outs for both crossings, perpendicular on Montana, RFPs. We'll bring a update to you if during the design process MDT comes out with a solid no on something, but we'll keep you up to date on this project as it continues on.
Is there ever a change of the guard at MDT?
Mayor and Commissioners, actually,
they all seem to follow the same.
They just got a new director. I'm not sure of the new director's stance on some of this stuff, but I will say that working with them for the past several years, we are making headway. It's slow, the baby steps, but we're making headways into that they are recognizing that cities have policies, complete streets, and everything that they need to consider in the design of some of these projects, or that they need to take a step back. And if the city is recommending some, like a project like this, that unless there's a fatal flaw, you know, they're trying to be more yes than the traditional no.
Question.
No.
Do we have any public comments on this?
I would like to.
Well, are you done?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Come on. Speak up. Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Bob Jones. For those of you who don't know me, I'm actually usually here at Legal Women Voters, and most of the day today, Legal Women Voters Observer for. But I actually have an interest in this, partly because I'm a neighbor to the Lindale intersection of 106. Speaking to you directly.
Yeah.
And I use that crossing at Lindale fairly regularly, and even when there's no traffic, I try to jog, just in case, because it is a long way across, and it is a way across that's fairly commonly used, and I think would be more used if it was safer to use. I also have, weirdly, some coincidentally training in human factors engineering. And one of the questions I have, if you'll pull the Lindale picture back up again, we have had issues, I think, in town with 5-point intersections. Is that correct? In the past, right? So a question I would ask, and I know just from coming around here sometimes driving and walking, that there's confusion about, you know, who's coming out from where, when, what's the order of service, if you will, coming through here. Whereas at the Warren Street, I live on Warren Street, 2 blocks up, and on Warren Street, which isn't this, that's not the example used here, but on Warren Street, it's a simple right down the street kind of a thing. And I don't think there's a potential perceptual problem there. Have you had a chance to look at any of that in terms of how people perceive the experience of, you know, walking across? And by the way, I'm all about holdouts and traffic calming. I know you didn't mention traffic calming, but it's a state highway, federal highway, so you could figure out those flashing lights, hopefully would help. But my question is really about the perceptual issues around yet another 5-point kind of intersection. Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that, you know, the volumes at that intersection of Ewing and Rodney, you're right, it is kind of a weird intersection. The traffic volumes are very, very low.
Except for during school hours.
During school hours when they're coming down Rodney Street, especially. So,
okay, I didn't get my meeting back. They can't be talking about the
thank you, Mayor. So yeah, I think having the, you know, crossing on the east side pulls it away from that intersection too. So there's some benefit in doing that. I think the connectivity was the biggest benefit we saw in moving it. I will say our lead engineer on this, he lives right down by you too. I think he lives on Ewing Street and crosses out here all the time as well. And this is his preferred crossing too. So I think some of it's, you know, experience and what you're used to. And, you know, I think with the design, especially with bulb outs and some better enhancements there, that, you know, we feel good about the traffic flow through there.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on this? Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment on my case.
Authorization to solicit banker for financing of capital improvement and equipment. Director Danielson, you have the floor.
I'm sitting in for Director Danielson.
Go ahead, you have the floor then.
Mayor and Commissioners, the city's vehicle maintenance shop is currently in need of approximately $1 million in capital improvements. The proposed financing vehicle for those improvements are general obligation bonds. And the term of the loan would be 15 years, maturing in 2039. City staff are requesting that the commission consider authorizing us to solicit banking institutions for the purpose of financing the capital improvements. Steve Sharp with Baker Tilly would be our financial advisor on the process. And I believe he's with us online. And if so, I'm going to turn it over to him for a little more context and to answer any technical questions you might have about the process.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Steve Sharf at Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, financial advisor to the city. I think it's been summarized well in terms of what we're seeking next week for authorization. To reaffirm the authorization, is not entering into any agreements at this point with banks. It's simply authorizing us, working with staff to solicit banks for financing these improvements. We've provided various documents within the packet in addition to the resolution. I believe it outlines and summarizes the plan of finance well. Currently, just high level timing, what we're looking at is upon authorization, we will push out that term sheet that is included to local banks for financing immediately following, so the day after approval, which we would expect several proposals by early July with staff selection at that time. And then at that point, we'll be working with that selected bank for finalizing those terms and then coming back to you at the end of July for formal approval of the final terms of the offering with that selected bank. We did provide some preliminary financing schedules in what's called the pre-issuance report. I'm happy to go over any elements there. But in terms of the financing package, I think it complements what we're after here quite well and is certainly suitable to the city for accomplishing this. So with that, I'd like to keep it high level just with that summary, but I'm happy to dive into any level of detail that you might seek at this time.
Comments or questions? Are there any public comments on this topic? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Orange and Last Chance Gulch intersection study. Director Kanapi and or Mark Young, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission. Everybody knows this intersection down there, right there at the old Burt Ernie's. So, as that intersection has degraded the pavement and especially the stamped concrete that was put in years ago, when we started down this road of just basically looking at the intersection, we wanted to take a really enhanced look and see, because of the different traffic patterns that have happened over the past 10, 15 years, is that signal really warranted to be there? And are there enhancements that we could do there to promote and enhance the pedestrian experience there? So we engaged with a consultant, Dow Engineering, to take a look at that. They did traffic counts. They looked at the existing conditions, and long story short, they feel that the intersection doesn't meet signal norms for one anymore. Traffic is just not there. But it showed that a two-way stop control was warranted. So that would be, you would have continued traffic down Last Chance, but have stop conditions on side street on Lawrence. But that's not the one that was recommended simply because that didn't meet our expectations for pedestrian. So what was recommended through the study was an all-way stop intersection, which would be, instead of the signal, you'd have stop signs on those three legs. The stop controlled intersection, their stop signs have some advantages over the signal. You don't get the cycle time that if you're waiting as a vehicle or a pedestrian. The stop sign, as everybody knows, when it's your turn, you get to go. It provides some additional pedestrian opportunities to cross, because the vehicles are all coming to stop regardless of whether it's a green light or not. In this case, stop signs, they are required to stop every time. So I know the memo says that there's a plan to put the signal and flash and see how it works. In reviewing this and then thinking about it, we wanted to go back out to the public and do some more public outreach before we executed. And so what we're coming here is the all-way stop control is recommended. It has some drawbacks, but it also removes the signal poles from those corner locations, and it provides a little bit more room for enhanced pedestrian. The one gets out of the patio of the Union now, instead of being right next to somebody's table. And then with this project, after we get our public comment, when we get into the design, we're going to, redesign the bulb outs and ADA ramps, redesign that intersection. Probably will not put the stamped concrete back because it just doesn't wear very well over time. But we are planning to really make that crossing a pedestrian friendly crossing. And so be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Director Knopf. I would be interested as the public comment when it happens, just on any options, thoughts, etc., for ensuring that cars understand there's a lot of little kids down there who walk by themselves. And they're small, and who has, is it the pedestrians right of way, whatever signage we need to make sure cars are not sort of, doing the rolling stops with kids sort of willy-nilly in that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd want to make sure we're very careful about signage. And then when we design the intersection generally, I was recently at an event where a number of local artists were talking about opportunities to make pedestrian crossings more interesting. And it might be a great opportunity to talk to or to connect with some of the HPAC members or local artists about any opportunities to design that intersection in a sort of creative and interesting way. And other than that, I'm fine. The outreach, all stop, etc.
So Mayor and Commission, the plan, sorry, I didn't say this before, but the plan would be we do the public outreach and then we would come back to you with the results of that public outreach before we proceeded with any one option.
Any others? Do you have any public comments on this topic? Did you have your hand up, Commissioner Sherlip?
No, I was just going to echo. I'll echo what Commissioner Reed said. I love the idea of working with the Public Arts Committee, but also too, I think this is a interesting step for downtown Helena. I know there's been discussions of that Director Knopf and I have had about Sixth and Last Chance as well. So I'm interested to see how this can be more pedestrian friendly, especially with the increased activity in the area. So thank you, Director Knopf.
Any online?
Mr. Mayor, I have no public comment online.
Director.
Yes, Mayor.
Is there anyone from the public wishes to address the commission? Madam Clerk, do you have any online?
Mr. Mayor, no, I have no public comment.
Commissioners? This meeting is adjourned.
Concepts.